Nyawa, Sego, Sewagwego. My name is Asennaienton, Frank Horn, and I am super happy to be here to be moderating this panel. And I'm super thrilled and excited that they have agreed to share their thoughts and passions and expertise to this topic. I'm work with the ICI, and I lead their workforce development initiatives, which will be our focus on day 3. But today I've been honored to lead this panel, and we will be speaking about something that's, I think, everybody top of mind for most people in this room, if not all, about data centers, and kind of like what we just talked about, the good, bad, and maybe the ugly about data centers. But what does it mean, and what can it mean for our communities? And that's going to be kind of where we're going to focus our conversations. And I kind of backed into this space. I was a government employee for a number of years, and then got recruited over to Rogers and realized all the issues that I was working with community. I didn't realize the backbone, all the stuff that we're talking about in this room, was kind of the reason why I was having communications issues when I was trying to work with community. And so when I came to Rogers to work, I realized a lot of the similar conversations I was having related to housing was the same. It just, instead of house, it was a connectivity infrastructure. And so it kind of became a new passion. And through that time, that's when I became aware of ICI and the grassroots nature of this organization. And when I had the opportunity to become part of it, and they said yes, I was super happy to be part of it, because to me, this is the way it should be. It's about grassroots organizations. It's about hearing the voice of the community and being all in the same room and on the same page and having one voice to the right people to make change. Because the way we've been living and dealing without it's been too far. It's been that way for too far long. And so I'm thankful to have this conversation, and I'm hopeful that we have some great takeaways. And I come to you from 2 Mohawk communities of Ganawagi and Ganasdaga. And my mom and dad met at a longhouse ceremony many moons ago, and they communicated through the traditional ways there. And my mom and dad met at a social event and eventually got married and had a family. And to me, we're talking about connectivity. Even though my mom and dad are not from the same community, they connected through our traditional ways. And what we're talking about, how does it develop or enhance what we already have in terms of our Indigenous communities? That to me is, can that be empowered, and can we answer that question? And how does it relate to data centers? That's where I'm really thrilled to hear what we have to say around the table. So without further ado, I will pass along. First, I will pass along to Sharayah virtually from the West Coast. She's 3 hours behind in Washington State, but I'll pass along to Sharayah for an introduction.
Thanks, Frank. Hello, everyone. Nautsiam Nischalacha, Sharayah Lane, son of Snat. My name is Sharayah Lane. I am a member and lifelong resident of the Lummi Nation. This is in Northwest Washington State, for anyone who may not be familiar. And I am a senior advisor for community connectivity with an emphasis on Indigenous community connectivity at the Internet Society. I'm based in the US and have been working on what we call in the States tribal broadband for many years, and have had the opportunity to learn from and work with First Nations in Canada, understanding our similarities, some of our differences, our shared challenges to connectivity, and really have spent recent years walking through these unprecedented times when it comes to connectivity, these rapid changes that we are facing in Indigenous communities, and navigating that alongside community, understanding that landscapes, visions, goals, values look different for each community, and each community has its own sort of priorities and roadmap forward. So we work at Internet Society to partner with those communities to work alongside them and to reach the goal of full connectivity for all of our Indigenous communities across North America. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharayah. So we'll pass it on to the gentleman on my far right. I forgot your name. I know we met virtually.
Hi. Hey, I'm Sendil. I'm the cloud architect at Wiki or Wiikwenkoong. Previously, I used to work with conflict-affected regions like war-torn regions. So I have some idea about capacity building in such communities, and I'd like to talk more about how we're going about setting up our data center.
Hello, Ani Bonjour. My name is Michael McCormick. I'm from Wiikwenkoong Unceded Territory. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for there. I wear a couple of hats in my community. One of them is the IT team and the data center, as well as the extensive drone and surveillance teams that we have in our community. We have about 20 drones in our community. About 10 of them are nesting stations and about 700 Meraki cameras across the board for community safety.
There we go. Oh, geez. Sego Sebogwego, Skylee-Storm Youngguts, Nyawagoa Asenadu for introducing us today. I work for the First Nations Information Governance Center. You saw my colleague Olivia speak this morning on a panel. I work for a different team. We're a fairly new team at FNIGC. So we're the Data Sovereignty Research Collaborative, otherwise known as the Collab. We're a little bit different in a lot of different ways. We're focused on looking at questions of data sovereignty, not just in the digital world and not just looking at data, but also looking at what is data, how is it created, what constitutes the difference between data and knowledge and information, and how is that processed within the world we live in today. So, light questions. We're a new team, but we're figuring out that landscape. I come to this work by way of information sciences. So my background mostly comes from archives and how we organize databases and how we access information within the legislative landscapes that we have here today. I'm fairly new to the data center AI conversation. However, like most people in their early 30s, I think it's been kind of enmeshed in most of my daily life. So I'm looking forward to talking about it today. Nyawagoa.
Okay, so the question is, how do we, data centers, there's a lot of things we can tackle in that regards. But I guess the first one is maybe talk to the two gentlemen from Wiki who are operating their own data center. Can you tell us maybe the story as to how it came about, what inspired your community to have a data center, and we'll go from there.
So Sendil and I, about 5 years ago, we used to work together. Well, he helped me build the cloud networks for a child family services network. And during that time, we'd often talk about data centers and the benefits of data centers and how Wiikwenkoong could benefit from having a data center in its territory. And from there, it just kind of took on a life of its own, brought the idea to Chief and Council. And Chief and Council had I guess they had the confidence in our team to consider this. We had to go back a few times and have little tugs of wars with them. But in the end, we were able to get our 20-foot modular data center delivered in July of this year, I believe. July, right? So now on our territory, we have a 20-foot modular data center ready to go, and we're just waiting for Sendil to put the internal components in and go from there. So that's been a journey so far.
So in terms of that journey, it sounds like there were some maybe questions from leadership and not understanding what a data center is, what it could mean for the community. Like, how were those conversations to get the buy-in?
So we basically had to let Chief and Council know what a data center is, how we go about operating one, and to have their confidence in being able to manage one securely and safely. So we had a couple of meetings with them. We explained what it is we're trying to do and the need to have access to our data. We don't have any access. Well, we don't have a lot of access to our data right now. We don't know where it exists. We have to almost beg for it and get into wrestling matches all the time with different entities about our data. And I find that to be a little ridiculous.
Yes. So I guess the ownership of data is probably the main driver of that conversation. The reason for the project, would that be the main one?
Ownership and accessibility, yes.
Yes. Okay. So I think that kind of leads to Skylee in terms of where you come in and data that is, if it's outside the community versus what maybe a community like Wiki can control. Like, what would your comments be about that in terms of empowerment to the community?
I think communities, especially from the lens of FNIGC, we feel that communities will decide what is best for them in their specific situations. So for some communities, like Wiki, that is very, very much like they've decided, they've formulated, they know what their needs are, they know how this is going to serve them. It's going to be completely different from another community that maybe doesn't have the electricity infrastructure, things that would support the use of a data center. And I mean, not everybody is going to have a massive building style data center. Some of these things are going to be a little bit more of a smaller scale. But when we're talking about ownership, access, possession, control, these principles of OCAP, they can look different depending on who's enacting them. And I think just because a community doesn't have a data center within their own territory doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have ownership and access and control. It really depends on what types of partnerships or what types of agreements are enacted, because you can have a data center within your own territory, as colleagues of mine have pointed out, but still not really have the safety or the infrastructure in place to protect that data. So connectivity is one thing, and having that infrastructure is one thing, but it's what we decide to datafy and digitize and how we use that and how we protect it. That is a completely other part of that equation that I think is more so important for respecting and affirming those principles of OCAP.
Thank you. Sharayah, from your perspective at ISOC, or the Internet Society, and data centers and data sovereignty, what are your comments, and what do you have? Like, is there anything that comes first to mind?
I think, as with many aspects of connectivity, this is what we're talking about now. I know, going all the way back to the pandemic, that it's been a sort of phase and stage process of what are we collectively working on together now. And earlier this year, data centers became an important issue and topic. In the US, there is an environment and a climate of urgency. There have been regulatory actions that have been streamlining these processes. And there's a real pressure on tribal nations to kind of move quickly on understanding, planning, developing data centers. A big part of our work is to try to slow things down a bit, to be able to really understand the whole context, the full context of what's happening, to really understand the technology behind data centers. We know that a lot of our Indigenous communities, we're all learning as we go. And so we want to have a real working knowledge and understanding of what these are and how they function and how they'll impact our communities. We heard our opener talk about the environmental implications with water and things like that. There's also the environmental implications of what these centers put out. So there are a lot of communities, non-Indigenous communities in the US, who are actively sort of protesting against large data center development near their communities because of the environmental concerns. And there are people who are putting a lot of pressure on Indigenous communities to move quickly on this. I know I talked to one tribe who had already been approached by 3 different investors trying to work a deal with them to get a center development on their tribal lands. And so I think one of the things that we're continuously having to do in this context as a whole is work to sort of shut out the noise enough to be able to have an understanding of what is unfolding in our communities, to have a working knowledge of these technologies, and to be able to make decisions for communities to be able to make decisions that are in their community's best interest. And like we shared, there's so many different ways that that could look. With centers, there's so many different ways that this can be rolled out. Geography plays a huge role. Climate plays a huge role. The temperature and climate. And so there's just a lot to figure out, but there is this sense of sort of pressure and urgency that I think has been present for years now for Indigenous communities to move quickly on this. And I like to try to push back on that a bit and say, no, we get the opportunity to take our time and to do this in a way, in a good way, and in a way that's best for our people.
Yeah, I like how you said that we have the right to take our time and to make a decision that's the best for us, and when we feel it's time for us. So I guess maybe to the gentleman for Wiki, during the AI conversation this morning, there was some conversation around the environmental impacts and if it gets too large scale, what it can mean. Had those factors and those aspects of a data center, have you what's in terms of those mitigations? Is it impacting your community in that way? Have you thought about it? What have you done to mitigate those? How would you respond to the environmental side?
I'd respond by saying our data center is so small right now. It's a micro data center, so that's not really coming into our field of vision right now. Perhaps later, once we scale up, if we find other nations interested in storing their data with us, perhaps that'd be something we could look at then. But as of right now, it's such a small data center.
Okay, so there's no real. It's marginal to the point where you don't really have to figure out. It doesn't impact your community or the area negatively at all?
No, I think our biggest concern is how we're going to keep it warm throughout the winter months. But for real, that's our big concern right now. But we did get it retrofitted for minus 40 degrees. But for now, we're not worried about heat. We're not worried about cool. We're worried about keeping it warm.
Which is probably a good problem to have.
It's a good problem right now, yes.
Yes, okay. So Skylee, in terms of, you're more on the data sovereignty side of things, or what would you say about the environmental aspects of data centers? Do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, for sure. I think that is a big part of maybe to the point of this, of like the size of data centers for communities of what they're using. It's not going to be like Meta's proposed data center, which is like the size of the island of Manhattan. That's very different. Zuckerberg, he made a post showing his new data center laid over the top of the island of Manhattan and just to show the size of it. Something like that, I would say First Nations need to be aware in Canada that we're living in territories that have always been eyed for development, always been eyed for extraction and for what benefits that they could offer non-Indigenous people. That's always what it's about. And, in Ganawage, Gerald Tayage Alfred always says it's always about the land. And it really is. And I think that's the key issue when you're looking at data centers coming in from these larger companies, or this idea of economic benefit to the community. You really have to look at what costs you're paying for that benefit. There might be some jobs created, sure, depending on the size of these things, but you'd be amazed at how few people they need to run these giant places. It's not very many. And a lot of people are very specialized in what they do. So that's another thing as well. So a big thing is, of course, Madeline brought up in the last presentation something that I was going to bring up in this panel, which is the Cloud Act with the United States, and the fact that we all use information that goes through channels through the United States for sure. And that's something to be aware of, especially if you are planning any type of climate action, community organizing, things that maybe necessarily have an interest to both the US and the Canadian governments. You have to be very aware of those things to maintain your own independence and your own sovereignty. So for me, I think on the environmental issue is thinking about those scholars like Carolyn and Michael Runningwolf who say, If you're using this to make cat memes and you're wasting like several bottles of water just to do this fun thing, that's one thing. But if you're using it to like save a language that would otherwise disappear, that's another. It's a tool that has a cost, and we have to be very cognizant of how we're using it and what we're using it for.
So considering those costs, so for the potential benefits of a data center and what it can mean to community, but is making what the underlying infrastructure mean or could be for a community, should that be part of the discussion so that people are aware what's coming there, but also so they're fully aware of all the aspects of the good, bad, and the bad? Is that important in your opinion?
Yes. I mean, our whole idea at the collab is that First Nations need to be armed with enough knowledge that includes the good and the bad to make informed decisions that work the best for their specific situation. You know, if you're going to be informed of how it's going to affect your lands and your waters and the resources that you have within your territory, but you realize that the benefit of what it provides is actually going to make a tangible difference in the lives of people, then that's a decision that your community has to make. We can't tell you which decision to make because that's nobody's business but the people who live there.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of the data center that is almost there, it sounds like it's almost ready to go. In terms of benefit for your community up to now, and what do you expect to happen in the next year to 5 years? Do you have a sense of what has been benefit for your community up till now?
I think just having a central repository where we could safely store our data and preserve our culture for the future generations. I think that's what we're aiming for.
Okay. And is there any tangible economic benefit for your community so far? What happened?
Other than developing a large IT team, building capacity for that team, I mean, that's about it right there.
Really? Okay. Now that you're going to be operational in the very short note, will there be any benefit moving forward, or will it be the same moving forward?
It looks like our IT team may get a little bit bigger, so we're actively recruiting all the time. We're putting our employees through rigorous training, putting them through their certification processes, get them on the job training, and yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned in your introduction drones.
Yes.
The drones in your community, was that independent of the data center conversations, or were they one and the same?
It was. So the drone conversation kind of came out of community safety. Wiikwenkoong, as I'm sure other communities out there, is dealing with the drug epidemic, sex trafficking, human trafficking. And what kind of brought this about is we started deploying Meraki cameras throughout our rental property units, and we started seeing what active addictions look like, and we were able to give chief and council some insight into what's going on in our territory. And once we seen that, we saw the benefits of the cameras. We deployed another 600, so we have about 700 cameras right now. And the drone nesting stations. Does anyone know what a drone nesting station is? Nobody? Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Explain
Okay.
if you.
So basically, a drone nesting station is a box that sits on top of a roof. And when you call upon that drone, it opens up and the drone will shoot out of it. So we have the latest drone technology for our community. As I mentioned earlier, we have about 20 of them. But yeah, so the drone and camera and surveillance was a different conversation that was based on community safety. Basically, what could we do with technology to improve community safety?
So the drones, is that integrated with your police services?
The drones is integrated with our police services too, and we do provide intel to community street crimes units throughout for the Manitoulin Sudbury area.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And since now that you have the drone technology, is the community safer? Do the community members feel safe, more safe?
So what's really funny is we went from one end of the spectrum to the other. We went from, we don't want these drones invading our private areas. We don't want them peeking in our windows to we're now at a point where the community is asking for more drone flights. So with comments such as we feel safer when the drones are in the air.
Oh, really?
So yeah, I didn't think we'd get to that point because we had so many battles. Data center, yes, but the surveillance program itself was quite the battle with chief and council. and with the community.
So you're saying that because the community sees the benefit, they endorsed it.
Absolutely. They embrace it now.
Really? So in terms of that endorsement with community, was it through the formal channels or is it through like word of mouth or both?
I think it was through both. We heard from community members calling the band office complaining almost daily, to now complain that there's not enough drone flights. Our community, much like everyone's community, is quite vocal about their opinions. So yeah, we're definitely heard from it on a daily basis.
Okay, fair enough. So we won't. Well, our panel's not about drones, so we'll go back to data.
No, that's
center.
fine.
But blame that on me for asking that question. But it's really fascinating. But it's about security, right? And
it's community safety, right?
Yeah.
And we even now we can deploy a full drone team at 1 o'clock in the morning anywhere between Manitoulin and Sudbury, and we have assisted OPP in search and rescues.
really,
So when it would take their team 3 hours to respond, we can have a full advanced certified drone team on the ground within 30 minutes.
seriously. So do you have some sort of MOU with the OPP on this?
We have an MOU with Wiikwenkoong Tribal Police, but not with the OPP. They'll just call us when needed.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
we're quite happy to work with them.
Well, congratulations. I think that's a congratulations story.
Yeah, it's definitely saved a lot of lives. If we see anyone in active addictions, we're even exploring the ambulatory purposes of drones right now. So being able to deliver these medical instruments into the field within 30 to 45 seconds when the ambulance is still raising its and the ambulance in the drug epidemic, as you know, is constantly busy all day long, right? So sometimes that ambulance isn't there. So we're exploring using drones for ambulatory purposes now.
Okay, fascinating. Now, in terms of the infrastructure for the drones, is that separate than the data center, or is it one and the same? Because it's under your IT.
No, that's
division.
right. So Sendo here really helped us scale up our community. I don't know if anyone knows Wiki, but there's not a lot of connectivity there. The LTE signal is terrible. And so we basically just shot up a bunch of Pico point-to-points, and now we just have a mesh network that encompasses most of our community
Oh, fascinating.
that supports the drones and the cameras.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, so drones is about community safety. And I think one of the aspects of data centers is the safety of our information.
Right.
That's ours.
It's kind of like this position is really a shield for our community, right? A shield for the technology in our community and ensuring that not only we're being good stewards, but that these other entities are being good stewards with our data as well.
Yeah. So in terms of drones and community,
Yes.
how many are you, excuse my ignorance, I only know of you now. Is there other communities doing the same thing?
So it's funny because what we're doing right now is we're going to Moose Cree next week to kind of show them how we use drones and how we use cameras and pass on our knowledge to them. We recently met with a tick machine, spoke to Garden River, and what else were we working with? Yeah, I mentioned the tick machine. A handful of other communities.
Yeah,
they're starting to.
So they're just getting out that is.
Well, it's funny because the OPP are actually telling these communities to reach out to Wiikwenkoong for drone and camera advice.
Fascinating.
It is. Wow. It's my favorite part of my job. The data center, not so much. I can leave that to Sendel.
Okay,
but I really enjoy making a difference when it comes to being able to use technology to save lives, right, and prevention. Yeah. So now our community can get into a preventative stance when it comes to any crime in our community. If somebody's breaking into a house, our camera will see it. Our 24-hour surveillance room will see it. They'll deploy a drone. The drone will go out, and we have security 24/7 as well. So we have a three-pronged approach, and we call tribal. Wow. So usually by the time that person walks out of that house, there's a big drone hanging there with a spotlight. There's security guards, and there's camera footage already rolled up being sent to tribal, and the police are pulling up as well.
You should have your own TV show now.
Yeah. But that's the favorite part of my job, being able to make a difference with community safety.
Okay.
I'd like to make a point on how the data center ties into this. Sure. What's the plan?
Yes.
Right. I know we've been talking about drone, right? So right now, most of our cameras, almost all, has only 30 days of storage, right? So what we want to do is bring all the storage, right? Bring into a data center. Now that we have our own, and later on, so we have AI train on that, right? So that means, okay, so if there's a car, right, that came in, and are suspicious. Okay, when did this come last? Like 6 months ago, a year ago? So what areas, right? So all this pointers can be built, but again, with only if you have the data, right? So with the data center, bring in all the data from all the cameras.
Fascinating. Yeah, that makes sense. So, and in terms of the data center, that will be Wiki's information for you to hold, and you control that data.
Yeah, for all of the entities in the community.
Okay. And in terms of access to the data that is on the data center, who has access?
So everyone will have access to their own areas, right? So it's an Azure architecture. So it'd be just like, use your own cloud environment.
Okay, fair enough. So in terms of FNIGC and what we just shared at Wiki,
Yep.
in terms of data sovereignty, what's your comment about all that stuff? And it seems like it came from the community, it's meeting their community needs. Like, they're doing it the right way, or is there gaps that they might see, or like, what's your take on that, FNIGC?
As FNIGC, we're supporting communities finding the ways that they feel uphold their own sovereignty. This sounds like it definitely does. I mean, you have to be careful when you have a data center, choosing what you datify and what you store and how it's connected. So if it's connected to the broader web, those things, need to be safeguarded through cybersecurity protocols like encryption and password protection. I mean, it sounds like in this case that is the case. So, I mean, that's a best practice. We can't necessarily say, though, what is the right way or the wrong way to do this, because like I said earlier, everybody's approach is going to be different. I know that sounds kind of like a cop-out, and in a way it is, but it's so complicated when you talk about what the needs are for a specific community. A community might need this like 20-foot data center. Another community might need something the size of a garden shed. Another community, with more than 10,000 people might need something a little bit bigger than that. And what is it going to be connected to service-wise? That's really going to depend on that community's relationship with those service providers, but also, too, what they feel comfortable having digitized and what they feel comfortable having as data. Because, when you're talking about cultural and linguistic and educational and then, now like community safety data, those things are very valuable in the wrong hands. Because we see it even in the non-Indigenous community. People are putting all kinds of information into their phone at all hours of the day. And that information is being stored with a variety of different companies, and they're essentially selling what you need back to you. You're not even really making your own decisions when you're shopping or looking for things. It's all being fed to you through what they know about you through your data. So that's the biggest thing for me is, if you're going to build your own data center or partner with someone, you at least have to make sure it's secure and it's on your own terms. So there's no right or wrong way. It's just what works best for the people and what they're using it for and what they need.
Yeah. Sharayah, from the Internet Society's perspective on the story that Wiki just shared about data centers and drones, what comes to mind for you?
I think that's so cool. That's what a part of, like, my favorite part of this job is getting to hear examples like that and getting to hear how Indigenous communities are using technology to exercise sovereignty. And you hear some of the most amazing stories. And so I think it really is a successful rollout for the community. It's ongoing, of course. Everything with technology, the conversation is never over. And so we'll get to see in a few more years what needs may arise, what advances have happened, and the conversation continues. I think and I'll talk a little bit about the U.S. To add that to the conversation. In the U.S. context, there's a few other considerations when it comes to data centers as well. There have been some executive orders around expediting the development of data centers, the role of data centers in AI, which we heard a little bit about in that example, and the need for fiber technology as well. So there are multiple moving pieces that Indigenous communities will have to consider when entering into this conversation. Another piece that was shared from the example we heard is around workforce development and capacity development. So within communities, and that's always a larger part of the context and part of all of our conversations, whether it's data centers or any other infrastructure development, is how are we training and preparing our community members, our Indigenous community members, to have the skills to manage and troubleshoot and to run this new infrastructure. And from that place, thinking that, I mean, and I share this all the time, but from a capacity building or community development perspective, it's my hope and vision that Indigenous peoples will be leaders, the leaders in the IT sector in my lifetime. And these are all parts, these are all sort of steps in that direction. So there is that opportunity there as well for data centers to continue to advance community development and economic development within communities. In the U.S., it is. I think one of the differences, again, is that pressure that's sort of being put on people. There's this gold rush sort of feel right now around AI and the role of data centers in AI. And so again, I've talked to tribal leaders who have people sort of knocking at their door, looking to use their tribal lands and navigating that environment. And conversations like this are so important to be able to, again, like we shared in the example, what are some of our key needs right now in our communities? We have so many things developing and advancing at a rapid pace with connectivity and technology in Indigenous communities. So what are some of our key priorities? In the last example, we heard it's around safety, community safety. And does something like a data center play a role in that? Is that something that we need to prioritize and expedite? Or is it something that we can focus on down the road? Always understanding that the conversations around data and around AI are going to become increasingly important as time moves on. So data in Indigenous communities may not have been as I don't want to say not as important, but the context of it not as focused on as it will be moving forward. So data is going to be used in new ways and is going to be used increasingly as we move forward. And so how does that fit into this whole conversation as well? And I want to apologize. I do have to go off of video, but I am still here and I'll be back on in a few minutes.
Thanks, Sharayah. So I think we're up to time here. Am I correct in this in terms of? Yeah, okay. So first off, thank you, panelists, for sharing your time and making the effort to come to the ICS. It's super appreciated, sharing your expertise and your comments on this topic. And thank you, Wiki, we found you through an article, and Phil was he reached out to kind of cold call you, and the fact that you took the call and willing to drive to Ottawa to share your story, because I think tangible community stories it's meaningful to the conversations we're having in this room. So thank you as well. So anyway, thank you, panelists, and on to the next one. Niall, go on.